they started at the same time, so he's obviously in a,
I don't know if they start this.
that's what he said.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's true.
What was the, I don't even remember what it was that he,
Where did you go?
Yeah, I think it's library.
Library.
Board maybe? I don't know.
Like Santa Rosa, and then
To answer your question, Jay's trying to get that problem solved with the
Santa
PD.
yeah.
Trying to get off the
just on the south, one of the suburbs up there.
just for this
Stop
stuff.
there to see her.
Either that or he's still towing
Yeah, keep
somebody.
moving on it.
It could be that too.
Given the weather, I'm sure Steelers.
I saw a couple in the ditch yesterday.
What time is it? 3 or 4 minutes here? Up there, yeah. I'll send this to you by email, but I need to talk to Jay too. Yeah, when I went to Mike, League of Minnesota Cities has a 3 o'clock. And run up to Lakeville. Planning program that the chair of the planning commission. 2 in the ditch.
Yeah.
Sam Houston Insurance Program. I don't think you've taken on 4.
Maybe not.
Was evidence that there'd been more. I know Mike did, Mike took it. Right there.
Yep.
So I've gotta have you and Jay, do that, so we'll set that up. It's not that, it's, I've done it a couple of times, but we'll have to do that as chair, so.
Yeah.
Set up.
Yeah, and actually, it's pretty open right now. I still haven't found anything. Just going on interviews, so.
Okay, okay. This is all online stuff, so you can start it and.
Oh, okay.
Start it and the rest, so yeah.
Yeah, I know I had gone to some kind of zoning thing before, but that was a class, I think, up by the state.
It's, I'll talk to you.
Whoa.
Always for you guys is invigorating.
It says it's on. But it's not recording it. Usually it'll give us.
Who's working back there?
She took her retirement. And she got, yeah. So she got a letter from Iowa and stuff. Pretty easy to take there. She was in Chicago for the last 3 years. On March 1st, they had off in 2000. And in October.
No, yeah, I guess, I couldn't look on my computer, but,
Yep.
okay.
And she said, she's an Montreal right now, and she said that, there's the cut out there just about the same amount.
So we got a forum.
Yeah.
Right.
Stay out with the small people. Spend enough time up there. Dan, if you wanna go.
Is it just recording this time? Or maybe?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to call the Monday, February 11th, 2013 Planning Commission meeting to order. That brings us to the first item on the agenda, which is roll call. Pidd, here. Price,
Here.
Longton,
Here.
Hema, Duden,
Here.
Charnell,
Here,
and Showboom. He has another meeting at the same time, so he'll probably join us in a little bit. That brings us to the third item, which is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
a motion.
Second.
I've got a motion by Charnell and a second by Price. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to number 4, which is approval of the minutes from January 14th, 2013. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
I have a motion by Duden
Second.
and a second by Longton. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to number 5, which is public input. Seeing no one from the public, we'll move on here to number 6, which is public hearing, and there is none. So that brings us to number 7, which is discussion items. 7A, zoning code rewrite discussion.
We've all waited patiently and anxiously for tonight's meeting to arrive, and we're ready to go. We have Ron Ziegler and Andrew Barbas here tonight. They're the consultants that we're working with to assist us with this project of rewriting the zoning code. As you all know, we've talked about this for some of you more often than not for the last couple of months. And what we wanted to do tonight was have Andrew and Ron here just to kind of present their work so far, really trying to concentrate on the format of the new zoning ordinance to kind of familiarize you as commissioners what this is going to look like. And then beyond tonight, we'll have them finish up a couple of the unfinished sections in the ordinance, put them into a package. And then I think what I want to do is either they'll come back and make a presentation and an opportunity for questions, or I'll simply do that and begin to lean on you as commissioners to assist with the mapping of the new districts that the new ordinance is proposing to create. Because I would like to have the zoning map work done once we get the document written, the actual text of the document. I'd like to have the zoning map work done before we actually go out to public hearing and invite the public in to look at the new proposed zoning map itself, as well as the zoning district or the zoning code. So we'll, over the course of tonight and the meeting in March and maybe falling out into April, maybe we can get this to the point where by April we've got a zoning text and a zoning map that we all feel reasonably comfortable with, and then we can talk about scheduling a public hearing and actually moving forward with its adoption. So that's kind of just a kind of a broad overview, but I'll turn it over to Andrew and Ron to kind of make a presentation with some of the work that they've completed so far. Consider this informal. If you've got a question and you want to ask it when it's in your mind, ask it. If you've got questions later, we'll have some time, but we'll want to at least start familiarizing the commission members with the format and the work that's been completed so far. So, Andrew and Ron?
Thanks, Dave. My name's Ron Ziegler. I'm with Community and Economic Development Associates. Andrew's going to do 99% of the talking tonight because he's the one that's been involved mostly in the project. But I just wanted to say a few words to thank you on behalf of our company for the confidence that you and the rest of the city has shown in our organization in moving forward with this project. So we hope that, like Dave said, the discussion will be very informal tonight, and don't hesitate to jump in whenever you'd like to. So with that, I'll let Andrew kind of walk you through it.
Yeah, thank you guys very much for having us here. So this document before you is just kind of, it's a very flexible document. Nothing is in stone as of yet. The major thing that I tried to do was take a look at what the Minnesota Basic Standard Template and Code are and kind of reduce it to that. And it affects the R1, R2, Industrial 1, the sign ordinance, as well as some information talking about historic sites within the community, your mixed use zones as well, and the manufactured homes. What we're looking to do is kind of consolidate a little bit. Looking through the zoning code, you had R1, R2, R3, R4, RRRRR. Reduce that to an R1 and R2. And then also for the industrial zone, you have Industrial 1, Industrial 2. We reduce that to an Industrial 1. We can kind of just go through here starting on page 2. I'll try not to talk your ear off too much, but we'll go through it. Everything highlighted in yellow, the sections highlighted in yellow were modified or taken out completely. So it wasn't all brand new language. We did try to incorporate some of the aspects that I saw were nice from the previous code as well. And once again, the idea is we'll reduce it to the bare tax, and then everything after that, you know, this is when we work with you to add in anything else. So you're looking at your permitted uses. as well as your permitted accessory uses. In the permitted uses, there was a few that we added, churches, agricultural, gardens, forestry, manufactured home, making sure they meet the standards set. And then also some talk about family daycare facilities and so on. Your conditional uses, I kind of kept the same as well. Did add in home occupations to residencies. Looking at the lot requirements and setbacks on page 5, these numbers are currently the ones that are with the state template, the state bare minimum. So once again, you kind of starting that lower. You can always increase that and change that as we need to. And the same goes for your building requirements and conditional use permits and standards. If we go to page, let's see here, standards. If we go to page 7, you see some things were added that were not previously in your R1 and R2s. Some of the different specific standards, the licensed daycare facilities, for example, talk about storage sheds and making sure that those are kind of covered. And then the home occupations in a residency. A lot of times people might try to pull that off. You want to make sure you have that under control. And then page 9, which is some new language as well. Private recreational facilities as a principal use, including private recreational facilities, wind energy conversion systems, and nursing homes. And a lot of the same language is also used for R2. Anything that's okay in R1 will be okay in R2, and then you kind of add it onto that. The R2 is supposed to cover where the R3 and R4 previously were, or currently are, I should say. So trying to shape the R2 into all-encompassing for those other ones that are currently here. It's very much the same sort of setup. So you have your permitted uses and structures, permitted accessory structures, conditional uses. I did take out the interim uses. If you look at page 11, at the bottom you see interim uses, uses by administrative permit, and lot item E and F, I should say. We did take those out with the state template. They didn't have those in there, and I think it was best serving to also kind of just take that out as well. Overall, for these sections, I think it's making, the language in there is making it so it's a little bit more general, maybe not always as specific, so then you can weigh in on the options and weigh in on situations as they arise. Let's see here. If we can move along, you see the industrial district, that's on page 16. Once again, you have your purpose, your permitted uses. We did add into the permitted uses your warehouse, distribution facilities, storage, manufacturing, assembly, machine shops, processing, professional offices, wholesale, mass transit terminals, and so on. You have the accessory structures and uses and conditional uses. Move along with interim uses, uses by administrative permit. All of this is still fairly standard from what we were doing before, nothing major. It's just taking that and making the I-1 before and I-1-2 into one. So you still have that kind of bare minimum for your I-1s. It's just making it a little bit easier for them to be next to each other. Obviously, still keeping away having some major manufacturer possibly blowing smoke next to a neighborhood or a school. No need for that. And your building requirements, for example, on page 21, page 22, you have your requirement and setbacks. Minimum lot area is 20,000 square feet. Minimum lot width 100 feet. All buildings shall be limited to 4 stories or 45 feet in height. and so on. The sign ordinance, which is starts on page 23. Yep.
Just jump in, I want to interrupt here, but I just want to, since I end up administering the ordinance and you end up seeing part of that administration from time to time, I just want to point out on the residential districts, the R1 and the R2, the distinction, as Andrew mentioned, is we're consolidating from basically 4 residential districts into 2. But let me put it into an example. If we had a R1 district, the single-family district, that's pretty consistent with what we've got right now in the R1. The real difference in the residential zoning here gets into our R2, which becomes our multiple-family district. So if someone is currently zoned R3 or R4, potentially we would rezone them to R2 under this new ordinance. They may or may not then be a conforming use because they're an existing development. But if someone came into us in the future and said, we've got 2 acres of land over here, we want to rezone that from whatever it is now to residential 2 because the developer wants to build an 8-unit townhouse. We would look at that under the rezoning to the R2 and compare that development proposal to the conditions in the R2. So there's, the state template isn't perfect, because it again incorporates some legalities that maybe don't necessarily apply directly to Cannon Falls, at least right now, and maybe aren't even included in our current ordinance at the moment. But I think it creates a little bit more flexibility with how we deal with our community, the way it's developed, limiting it from 4 residential districts down to 2. But essentially, from an administrative point of view, I think we can accommodate our single-family, twin-home, townhome, multi-family residential developments in our community with these 2 districts. It won't be a perfect fit in each and every case. We will have nonconformities no matter what we adopt, but we think we can make it fit. So Andrew's covered it fairly quickly, but I wanted to put it in the context of where we are today versus where we're headed with residential zoning. And the other important thing to mention, which I think you will understand because we have been down this road a couple of times with most of you, probably, well, you've even seen some of these. Under our conditional use permits, the state template is different than our current conditional use permitting regulations in our ordinance. I'm not going to say either one is better or worse, but they're a little bit different, but they're the same in that they both try to get at the same considerations. Does someone who falls under a conditional use permit that wants to do something, are they going to do something on their property, do something in their neighborhood that is a negative impact to the neighbors around them? And if they are, we can handle it as a condition under our conditional use permitting process. We'll still have a public hearing for the conditional use applications that come in, but we're going to treat them a little bit differently as staff, and you'll look at them a little bit differently as commissioners from what we have right now. I think it's going to be better because I think it creates a little bit more logical, flexible way for us to interpret these applications when they come in. Right now, our conditional use permit standards are really rigid, and they don't always fit so good. The state template, it's still legal, as is our current ordinance, they're both legal, but it gives us a little bit better abilities to kind of, I think, objectively look at these applications and say, you know what, we're either not real bothered by what you're asking us to do under conditional use permit, or under this provision, under our new ordinance, we're going to handle it this way or that way by requiring some additional screening, additional landscaping, additional noise control, maybe limit, if it's a commercial type operation that's next to a neighborhood, maybe limit the hours of operation, those type of things. We can do that in our current ordinance, yes, but to get there, we kind of jump around and kind of force fit it. I think it fits much better here. So if you look at the conditional use permit provisions in the new template from what you're used to seeing in this ordinance, it's a little bit different in terms of what it says, but the net effect, I think, gets us to the same place. But it is it's a different approach. So I just wanted to make those comments on the R1, R2 differences that are proposed here from what we've got, and specifically the conditional use permit considerations that we will need to make under the state template or our new ordinance versus our current ordinance. The rest of the things I would just ask you to at your leisure, kind of look at. You're probably gonna have some questions. If you don't have them tonight, that's perfectly understandable. It's a lot of information, but you'll get a chance to comment back later, like, why do we have nursing homes permitted in our new ordinance here? Are we gonna have more nursing homes? Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But it's a state template that's the basis for this provision. So there are some things we can kind of doctor up to as we go.
Right, it's just getting that baseline, that foundation, and then as we go, as you all go, adding to as needed. So I think it does make it a little bit easier for the general public and general person to be able to go through it. And the same is for the sign ordinances as well that we touched on. I think that there was a lot of good language in it already. We were just able to tweak it a little bit, look at what some other communities of our size are doing as well, and try to base some thought process off that. If we look at the historical difference data and sites, found some interesting information here. There's 30 different property listings that I was able to find that were either on the National Register or with the Minnesota Historical Society as well. The National Registry of the Downtown District was January of 2000. And a majority of the current businesses, or the current buildings, I should say, are contributing to that, meaning they are still upholding that historic foundation, the historic look and so on, where they would be eligible for different funding programs and so on if they so decided to go after those. The ones that aren't contributing, they still can do that, but they eventually have to kind of change what they're doing with their property or with the facade of the building to kind of meet back with those standards again. So they have a listing here of all the different properties, also when the properties were built and so on. Another, whether you knew or not knew, but the 3rd Street Bridge, that's considered a historical site within the community. Interesting enough, it was originally cost $9,000 to make, so if only all bridges only cost $9,000, life would be a little bit more simple. So you have some different, yeah.
But just on the historic too, I hate to interrupt, but
No, it's fine.
the historic district, we've talked about that before, and one of the things we've asked these guys to do, I've asked them to do, is figure out really what is our historic district. Not in terms of just the certification of historic buildings, because we've got that inventory here, but from the zoning perspective, and we wrestled with this a little bit here, is what does it really mean with our historic overlay district to the properties that are within that geographic area? We'll have some policy conversations as we move forward to the mapping about how we're gonna deal with these with the historic district and the historic buildings and properties within them. We have some choices to make on that, and I'm not sure kind of what direction we'll take. We'll rely on your input for that. But recognize that the historic overlay district falls over the properties that Andrew just identified here, and our current ordinance has been, carefully choose my words here, somewhat enforced in accordance with what was adopted back in 2006. We've had some good preservation, renovation work in the downtown that's certainly met or exceeded the standards. I haven't really administered or reviewed those projects in accordance with the 2006 ordinance that was adopted, and I don't think it was even administered after it was adopted before I got here. So we'll have some conversation on the historic district. It's not going to go away. We're not suggesting that it go away, but we're probably going to deal with it a little bit differently from what the 2006 ordinance says. The other thing on signs, the dynamic display signs that we so love and we've talked about a couple of meetings ago, that language is not part of this draft yet. It will be. I'll incorporate with Andrew's drafting here some language for the dynamic display signage that we talked about a couple of meetings ago. So that will be brought forward in here. And there will also be the need under this historic overlay district to bring in to the sign ordinance some of the standards for signage in the historic district. It's a little bit different than what's allowed or disallowed for signage throughout the rest of the community. It is a little bit different in the downtown. And we've got some things we need to make there too. So I'd like to bring that back into the sign ordinance draft for the downtown district. But otherwise, most of the sign ordinance language that you see in this draft is pretty much reflective of what we've got now, and that seems to work okay, other than we don't have dynamic display signs in there yet. We'll get to that, so, sorry.
No, yeah, no. This is open, so I mean, if you guys have any thoughts or comments, please feel free to speak up at any time. Just looking at the different talking points, then, you know, say with the manufactured home parks, with the current zoning, I think with that, as well as the mixed-use zones, I think you want the ordinances to be able to reflect what you want for the future, you know, so that's reflecting some of what the comprehensive plan is saying, and just making sure that there's some sort of a pathway for the future. You know, when that comes for the manufactured home parks, make sure that the zoning is talking about site drainage, flood mitigation, ground cover setbacks, open spaces, and so on. But I know that there are pockets within the community that with the mixed-use zones, for example, you could have a business or something that would be considered in the business district right next to like an R1 or a house or a family. And kind of trying to figure out how to move forward with that can be tough. So I guess in my mind, I saw there's 3 different ways to kind of go about handling that situation. You could keep it as is. You know, it has worked to this far. If it's not broken, why fix it, right? Or you could try to provide guidance with the areas for the future. You could call them transitional zones or transitional district. So then on a case-by-case basis, when things start to change, you can say, well, you know, we're thinking maybe permitted use for more of a business section area here and start to phase that out, or make it more residential friendly or R2, you know, for the future. So I guess that's something that as a board you'll have to kind of decide what direction you want to go with or how you'd want to deal with those mixed use zones moving forward. But it all depends on the language. If you make a transitional district, you could make it just same sort of language as an R1 or same sort of language as, like, for example, the industrial or business zones. So, but I think it gives you a little bit more flexibility overall to take things by a case-by-case basis. So hopefully it should help you all out, in my mind. But
And I think too, on Andrew's point, this gets back to this exercise of mapping. Once we get our language set, the rules of the game, so to speak, we have to apply the rules of the game to specific properties in the community. And that's where it gets a little bit tougher of drawing lines. And we all know, because we've struggled with this, or at least I've struggled with it for as long as I've been here, and I know some of you share this, this community has developed over a long period of time. And we do have businesses next to residents, and commercial next to churches, and vacant farm agriculture areas next to whatever. We have those situations. We're going to have situations like that into the future, and the question that we're going to have to resolve with your input is not only where do we draw these lines and what's the impact of drawing these zoning districts on real property in this community, but are there areas within the community that we really do want to begin to phase out over time? If we do, we can zone accordingly. And through our zoning, we've talked about non-conforming uses and the fact that certain uses are grandfathered in until something happens. Well, something happens is defined statutorily, but if we wanted to as a commission, as a city, if we had an area or several areas in the community where we just said, you know what, this isn't going to work long term for our planning, it doesn't maybe create very much compatibility in the neighborhood. Maybe we've got some adjoining property owner issues and problems. Maybe we want to zone this particular situation in a way that really encourages and ultimately forces a change to happen over time. And that'll be, you know, one of the important recommendations or policy discussions we'll have with you when we get to that point. So I think what Andrew's given here is maybe some options and some alternatives for those kind of situations, and that's where really we're gonna have to sit down and figure out are we okay living with this as is forever, the way it is, or do we wanna try to begin to nudge some changes in land use? And we can do that with the new zoning.
Yep, and, you know, like I said before, this is a very flexible document, and, you know, if there's anything that we need to change, I mean, this is the time in my mind that we can make that happen and really make it fit for what you guys want to do for the future, so.
So for starters, I think you've got some format, you've got some language. You can kind of begin as you look at it at your leisure. You can kind of see how this will be pieced together as we move forward. And hopefully sooner rather than later, we've got an entire document, and then we can get in and try to figure out how this is all working throughout the community and how we want to map these different areas. So if you've got any questions for Andrew or Ron tonight, feel free to ask them. If not, I'm sure one or both of them will be back, you know, in the future. And in the meantime, if you got questions, you know where to find me as well. Any questions at this point? No. Okay.
Okay. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate your time.
That brings us to 7B, which is Sandstone Ridge rezoning.
As I explained to the Planning Commission, I think you're all familiar with where this particular property is, going east out on County 25. This particular development has not gone as planned, obviously, and where it sits right now is the predominant owner of the area that I've identified in the map exhibit are you and I, the state of Minnesota. This property has been foreclosed. The state of Minnesota has acquired significant portions, at least the platted lots that exist out there. And Goodhue County is now in the process of moving that forward towards an ultimate sale. We've asked as a city of Goodhue County to have an opportunity to look at this property and potentially purchase it in the future to protect our interests. Our interest as a city, beyond planning and development considerations of the Planning Commission, is there's a considerable amount of unpaid delinquent assessments for improvements that were made in this property that someday the city of Cannon Falls would hope to be repaid. Whether or not that happens is uncertain at this point. But our goal has been, at least at the staff level, and I think shared by the city council, has been to try to encourage a situation or result here that not only gets this property redeveloped into a productive land use and something that will benefit the community, but also have a fighting chance of getting our delinquent assessments repaid, because it is a considerable amount of money that's at stake here. So what we're recommending tonight in order to help this protect our interests is we're asking the Planning Commission to initiate the rezoning of this property, which is currently an R3 district, to an urban reserve district zoning in its entirety, which it would include all of the properties currently owned by the state of Minnesota. The area that's in the darker shaded area is dedicated parkland that's owned by the city of Cannon Falls. And then OP2 Realport LLC owns two outlots that were never platted initially with the development. So there's basically three owners: the state of Minnesota, the city of Cannon Falls, and OP2. And what we're asking again tonight from the Planning Commission is that you initiate a rezoning process to consider a rezoning from R3 to an urban reserve. And again, an urban reserve zoning under our current zoning, not under the new one, we haven't rewritten that yet, is a 10-acre minimum lot size, and it's really a holding zone. It's our one zoning district within our current zoning that preserves the existing conditions of property for a longer-term outcome. And what that outcome is going to be, no one knows at this point. The next step that the county will take is they will move forward with the opportunity to sell this property, and whether or not anyone chooses to buy it, we don't know. But our concern is we would prefer not to have individual lots purchased in that subdivision one by one piecemeal, because it's never going to rise to the situation where our delinquent assessments would be repaid in that way. Plus, there's other limitations that we've all talked about on that property. So that's the recommendation. If there's any questions of the commissioners, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
How do we recoup our money if the city owns it? Seems to me more of my tax money goes to bail it out, and I'm further in the hole.
Yeah. City's not proposing to own it at this point, Dave. We have that opportunity if we submit a plan to Goodhue County. And if that plan is approved, potentially the city could buy it, and then that would be the unanswered question. If the city did buy it, what would they buy it for? Not in terms of dollars. What would we buy it for in terms of reuse? And what kind of investment would it take to purchase the property and redevelop the property? And we're not proposing that right now. We're proposing that we rezone it so that we can influence what happens in the future when the county does offer it for sale. At this point, we're not suggesting that the city's going to be the purchaser of this property.
When the county offers it for sale, are we guaranteed to get all of our money back, a portion of it, or none of it?
Yes.
More than likely none.
Well, I mean, clearly there's some value in the real estate. In its current
The
condition,
city won't allow any building permits up there, which you and me have been through countless hours.
yes, we have. You know as well as anybody some of the limitations of the property. And again, I wasn't here at the time when it was first developed. I know some of the history only from what I've heard or from what I've read. What I do know to be true is that it's an unfortunate set of circumstances with the soil conditions in that location, with the infrastructure that's been put in that isn't necessarily conducive to development at this point. It's going to be an economic challenge to come up with a redevelopment of those properties in a way that's going to recoup the city's investment that was made in infrastructure.
Because there's one section up there, up on top, that has the townhouses on it there, the big squares that look like lots, but
Yep.
it's not really townhouses, it's zoned as condos.
Yep.
And it is virtually impossible to get any kind of financing from anywhere, even China, on condo-type development units. If we put this in urban reserve, then the condo part of it completely goes away, or it just sits out there, or how does that get dealt with then?
In terms
When
of,
they go to sell this, aren't they gonna try and sell it as it is platted now? Because it's gonna take a certain amount of money to replat that, to change it, correct? And who pays
True.
for that?
true. Yeah, and that's an unanswered question too. When it goes to sale, the OP2 properties are not part of that. They are not owned by the state of Minnesota. So if there's two large outlots there that
Yeah,
are,
one of them's the hillside and all.
yep. Yeah, I'm not saying it's,
Other side off towards Knowlton's there, that's platted in the second plat that they never recorded.
yeah.
To have houses up on there, that's still usable, but the stuff over close to 25 is inusable, and part of it's covered by our bluff line thing, and that's why they didn't do any development in it, I believe.
Yeah, the rezoning itself really isn't going to do anything more than maybe identify from the city's perspective that if someone is going to buy it and they're going to buy it in its entirety, that they're not going to be able to come in and develop under this current plat. That eliminates that potential. But the zoning alone isn't going to gonna change what's there. I mean, the reality is, and you know this, because we've talked about it at length, the reality is that to develop this property the way that it's currently platted is a long shot at best.
Right. Because the city engineer wants it wholesaled and started over.
And I'm not sure that's entirely true, but we've debated that point
Really,
long and
really
hard,
close.
so, okay. Yeah. It's an unfortunate set of circumstances, you know,
I wanna know, you know, if we replat it, what I'm trying to figure out is if we move ahead and do that, is that in the best interest of the city, and can we recoup the most amount of money going that route? That's why I'm asking the questions.
Yeah, and there's,
I know a lot of the history about this, so, but I wanna know how the city's gonna recoup the most amount of money with the least amount of effort, I guess, and expense.
and that is the unanswered question here, because, as I said, you more than anybody knows the condition of that property, and I guess the real issue here is, can any development or redevelopment of the properties that we've identified here be done in a way that A, recoups the city's investment, and B, creates a return on the investment of whoever the developer is for the project that they propose to do there? And those are unanswered questions, both of them. So,
It seems to me this is a reasonable option for us to make and do right now, because then it does give you the option of covering up what already is there. I mean, all you're asking for is to change what has happened.
yeah, it has to be changed if anything's gonna happen out there. And what we want to do, from the city's perspective, and we don't have a lot of options here, but what we would like to do, short of buying it as a city and then turning the problem or the opportunity over to us, is to pass on to those who will look at purchasing this property the fact that it's no longer, what you see is not what you're getting here. It would be in this context rezoned to urban reserve, and the slate's gonna be wiped clean, and whoever buys it's gonna have to come in and start over. That's the reality of what's going on here. Is that gonna pay off for the city and everybody else?
I don't think the city wants or needs to be in the development game. I think that should be left to the private sector, because I don't wanna play Russian roulette with my money.
You're not gonna get an argument from me. So if you're comfortable with that and initiating that process, there could be a motion, second, and a vote on that. If you do go that direction, then what I will do is probably set up for the March 11th meeting, a public hearing. We'll give due notice, invite the property owners in, and have a conversation as to whether or not this will be recommended for rezoning.
Have you contacted OP on this at all, or?
I've had conversations with them about their land ownership interests here, but not specifically on the rezoning. They may not care. They may.
Well, I know what they said when the city engineer wouldn't cooperate with what they wanted to do, so.
Now, they also own the adjoining property here too,
Correct.
so we'll see.
Well, I guess I'd like to make a motion to move ahead with this, to get it into the urban renewal.
Urban Reserve.
I'll second.
I've got a motion by Price and a second by Cherno. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to number 7C, which is development proposal for Stanton Township.
I'll introduce this, and Jeff Griffin is here tonight. Wasn't here earlier when we started, but is here now for this particular item on the agenda. As indicated to the Planning Commission, there's been a request by Mr. Griffin to come before the Planning Commission to present the plans for the development of a 40-lot subdivision that's currently located just on the edge of the city limits of Cannon Falls. Looking for some input from the Planning Commission. I've provided you with what information I've got, which included just the newspaper article. Whether that's accurate or not, I wasn't at the meeting, but we'll say that it is. And then Mr. Griffin, I was able to just provide a copy of this too, of just the concept plan. Didn't print out that clearly, but just the concept plan for the 40-unit development itself. Again, for the Planning Commission, we haven't had, at least as long as I've been here, an issue that's quite similar to this. Mr. Griffin did request an annexation of some property other than this on the west side of 52 that was annexed to the city 3 years ago, maybe, 4? But that didn't require any Planning Commission involvement at that particular time. This one, again, because it's within Stanton Township and borders part of the city limits of Cannon Falls, the request has been made to share some information and glean any input from the commission that you may have. So with that, I don't know if you want to present any more information?
Thanks.
Yeah, this one's really dark here. This one's just as dark,
Thank
maybe.
you.
Thank you, Dave. I'm Jeff Griffin with G Cubed out of Chatfield. Just wanted to fill you in a little bit about this property. Many years back, probably 8 years back now, the CF Holdings, who owns the property, looked at annexing this into the city, went in front of the city council, requested annexation. The neighbors were against the annexation, and it did not go through. The city said they don't feel right. The township was against it also. We've been working extensively with the township and the county staff since that time to do a development in the county. 2 years ago, this very same plan came in front of planning and zoning here and the city council here for a similar feedback as we are tonight. And both the planning and zoning and city council gave positive feedback. The only change that's been made from the concept that was here in front of you 2 years ago is on the south end. The county really wanted 2 accesses into this property. We only had 1 access off of County Road 24. And if you look at the south end now, we've purchased a second access, so we now have emergency access out. Might be hard to see, but the main access curves right where it does now, just west of the turkey farm, and goes back here. We've purchased another road where we're gonna go cross-country and have a secondary access out, so to alleviate the county's concern. And that purchase, it ended up being 2 different properties we had to purchase to acquire that, and it's taken almost 2 years to get done. Because it's taken such long, Aaron Reeves thought it'd be a good idea to run it through planning and zoning and the city council again, just to get your feedback as we go forward with the county process. The plat has been approved unanimously by both the planning and zoning and the board at the township, at Stanton Township. What we're proposing to do is put a community septic system in and put sewer mains in all the roads to city standards. So the thought process is, whether it's 2 years or 22 years from now, if sometime the city does extend services out there, we have the infrastructure in the road going to one spot at the south end where it'd be easy to hook up and get served with city services. As I said, you know, the township does not want annexation right now, and the neighbors don't want annexation. The turkey farm, Mr. Peterson, he likes it the way it is, and we have a good relationship with him with this layout where we provided some buffer. So with that, I'm just here to answer any questions. And like I said, more looking for feedback as we move forward with the county board coming up.
I have one question.
Yes.
With are the streets gonna be complete city standards, or is there gonna be no curb and gutter?
No curb and gutter.
Okay,
No curb and gutter. We're just gonna have the pipes underneath it.
so it would be the same situation as we're just taking care of up in west side up here, where we're putting new curb and gutter and sidewalks, and so if we ever did annex it, we'd have that to go through again.
Yeah, I think the analogy being made here is the West Side Infrastructure Replacement Program that had
No curb and gutter.
blacktop streets that didn't have curb and gutter, and now they're being installed. I just want to make one comment too, just for purposes of clarification on the infrastructure, and we've spoken with Mr. Griffin about this in the past, at least at a staff level, that it's maybe not just that point, David, but it's also the fact that to install sanitary sewer and or water facilities at this point in Stanton Township in anticipation that in the future the city will accept and easily connect to those utilities is not the position that we're taking. It's been proposed to us several times in the last year or two or three as this project's being considered. That's not something that the city engineer is particularly enamored with. It's not something that we are particularly convinced is a reality in the future, whether it's 2 years or 22 years.
Well, my next question was gonna be, what about the density of this, since they're not like further down 24 where they have the 1 acre or 2 acre lots? Isn't there a state statute that you need a certain amount of fire hydrants and stuff in here to have this density? Cause someplace, once you get down under a third of an acre or half acre, once you get to a certain density, I think for public safety, you have to supply a certain amount of fire hydrants and that type of, not only just storm sewer stuff, but certain things like that. And I don't see a water tower here.
Perhaps Mr. Griffin can answer that. From the city's perspective, I'm not aware
And
of that particular
that's a
code.
significant expense if somebody's gonna come in and do that later, and I don't, you know, if we're preparing this for a future to be brought into the city, how far are we going with that? Are the streets gonna be 9-ton streets or 5-ton, or are they gonna be the current standards? How far, I guess, I'd like to know how far we're gonna go if we're saying we're gonna meet city standards.
Yeah, I want to be,
Current gutter doesn't meet city standards anymore.
yeah, I want to clarify. This is a rural subdivision. I mean, this is designed to county standards, to township standards. The roads are going to be 9-ton roads, and so as far as the section, it's going to be there. The thought process is, it's always, when you have a subdivision, and, you know, I know, you know, the Petersons and the people out there think that the city will never get there. Maybe they won't. I don't know that. I can't speak for that. But the thought process here is, we have really good soils at the south end of the property. And so to go ahead and put all the sewer mains and stuff in the road, and that way potentially, whenever the city comes in, and it may never be, but whenever it comes, at least you're not ripping out streets to put sewer mains down through. Regarding the water, are we gonna put a water tower? No. Are we gonna put fire hydrants? No. Are they required? No. There's no state statute, there's no county rule that require fire hydrants for this type of development. And so there's not gonna be fire hydrants in or a water tower in. We're looking at community wells, roughly 10 lots per well, 4 wells to serve 40 lots.
So there'll be a association involved with this.
Yes, well, there would be you'd have 10 lots that would have a shared well agreement, another 10 lots would have another shared well agreement. All the lots are gonna be dedicated to the government, and so they're not gonna be private roads. These are gonna be public roads maintained by the township. And so makes it a little easier, should the time ever come that it's annexed into the city, that they are public roads, and so they just go from one public entity to another.
If it did come into the city, what's the plan with the septic system then?
Septic system would just come out. I mean, it all goes to the south end, you just take that out and that would become a residential lot. Yeah, real simple. It's all gonna drain to one spot, and so you would,
Who puts the bill for that then? If
to-
the city brings it in, is the city gonna get stuck with the rehabilitation of the septic system and
There's-
reclaiming that land?
There's no reclamation on a drain field. You can pull a building permit 2 days after you disconnect it under state statutes. There's no reclamation on a sanitary drain field in Minnesota. So that's not a cost. It's essentially disconnecting a pipe there and hooking it up to a pipe that goes to town.
What about your drain fields and stuff here though? How are you gonna reclaim them?
Well, that's what I'm talking about. That's why I'm talking about the drain field. The drain field, I mean, you don't need the drain field anymore if it, and so there'll be a house over that drain field. Yeah.
I've never seen anybody ever issue
Oh, there's building permits all the time.
top of a drain field.
All the time. My company administers the septic program for Olmsted County, and I bet we have 4 permits a year where someone decides to build a house or expand a house where the drain field used to be. It's done all the time. They just locate a new drain field and build the house on the old one. It's a pretty common practice. You know, the idea, I mean, this property is real unique in the fact that it's got the river wrapping around it, and what we're proposing here is a lot of open space down along the river, 3 miles of walking trails, and kind of developing the back portion away from the turkey farm and leaving the part out front next to the turkey farm, open space that will be common area, and then, you know, potentially, should it get annexed, that would be developed at that time. And like I said, the only change over what we had in front of you 2 years ago is we now have 2 accesses into the property. Otherwise, the lots, everything else is the same exact configuration.
I'm very familiar with this piece of property. It's a gorgeous piece of property. I think the idea is great if you can put up with the smell of the turkey farm.
Yeah.
The nice thing about it is we're on the upwind side for the majority of the time. You know, the prevailing winds are from the northwest, and that's where all the houses will be, north and west of the turkey operation. But I understand your concern. I have been out there in July mowing when the wind's the wrong way, and I concur. But, you know, these people that are coming here are people that are, you know, wanting to get to the country, but maybe don't want to have all the work of a 5 or 10 acre lot. You know, and so these people are going to be able to have a smaller lot, but have some amenities of walking trails and horseback trails and that sort of thing. And so kind of a good mix of everything. And like I said, we've been through extensive meetings with the township and the county and the neighborhood, and this is something that Stanton Township really likes. And so we're trying to do our best to be a little forward-thinking, though, you know, because someday maybe the turkey farm will no longer exist, and the pipe, sewer, and water and city will extend out that way. I mean, it just so happens when we came in front of the city years ago and requested annexation, it's on a technicality. I mean, we abutted the city because the very north end of this property abuts the city, but that isn't how you'd ever get to it. I mean, that's down low, it's in the floodplain, that's the undevelopable part of the property. So where the pipe would come in on the south end out on 24, we're quite a ways away from the city out there. You know, probably a couple miles, all the way back to the interchange, all the way back to Highway 52. And like I said, those neighbors are not interested at all in annexation.
I have a question for you, Jeff. I mean, I'm hearing from Stanton Township's perspective and maybe even Goodhue County's perspective, I don't know, that there's strong favor for the proposal, for the development. From your estimation, what's the benefit to the city for this development to go forward? What really are the things that this city and this planning commission would be interested in if this development goes forward?
Well, if nothing else, I mean, you have some EDA people sitting in the audience here that can tell you more than anyone, but I expect these are going to be good-sized houses out there. This is going to be a high-end development, and if you have 40 high-end homes within 2 miles of a main intersection in your community, these people are going to spend money in your community. And so, if nothing else, just economic development of the area in general. I guess other people in the audience can speak to that, but absolutely. That's a lot of pluses to the city for that.
So what we're relying on is the economic impact of future residents who choose to purchase a lot there and build there, spending their money in Cannon Falls is what?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the tax base is going to go to Goodhue County and Stanton Township, you know, and so it's not the tax base, but like I say, you do have 40 residents that are going to move to the area and build high-end homes, and they're going to buy groceries in town, they're going to buy gas in town, they're going to hopefully have children in the school district, and it's all a multiplier. Use the hardware store.
What's the proposed lot value secondary, the proposed size of the home structure, or is there any covenants or anything like that proposed yet?
There isn't
One
covenant.
guy has a small little split, another guy I have a
I don't see,
3,000-foot two-story.
no, I don't see any small little splits out here. I would think that the minimum would probably be $350,000 residences out here.
350 on the house, and then
Probably another 50 to 75 on the lot.
they can't get the golf course lots sold, and that's where they're at.
Yeah, but you know, golf course is kind of a thing of the past. I do a lot of developing around, and golf courses are oversold. People are looking for other things in golf course right now, if you do the market studies. And this is gonna be a different clientele than a golf course clientele. I think there's a lot of people looking for, and we have a lot of frontage on the river, a lot of nice walking trails. This is a beautiful piece of property. Looking at a whole different market than that.
Yeah, it almost looks like maybe somebody that wants to have a horse, and someplace to keep the horse.
Absolutely. That's part of what we worked with the township on, is the fact that this green area, this buffer area that we're providing next to the turkey farm is open space where they can have common pasture. 'Cause like I said, a lot of people move from the Twin Cities down and say, oh, my son or daughter wants a horse, and they buy 10 acres, and then they get out there and they realize that's a ton of work. I mean, then you're buying a tractor, then you're trying to get some hay up, and where this is more a community thing, where you know, you have a barn, you have a shared barn, you have a shared pasture area, and so you know, it's a way for these people to have that lifestyle without maybe having all the work involved.
What's that average lot size then?
I think proposed here, I think the average is, on the whole development, is probably 2 acres, but proposed here are acre to 3.5. But then, like I say, there's a lot of open space. I mean, this property is 150 acres, and we're proposing 40 lots on 150 acres.
Yeah.
I may be the only one here, but you have my blessings.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the developer? It's really here for informational purposes tonight. I believe the city council will be looking at it as well. And I understand that Goodhue County will,
That's correct. It's on, I believe, the end of March in Goodhue County. And like I say, Stanton Township, their planning and zoning and board have both approved it. And we expect, you know, Stanton Township's gonna go with us to the county. And when we were in front of the county before, their major concern was having 40 houses on only one way out in the emergency vehicle. Now that we have that solved, we expect that it should go pretty good.
no further questions? Okay.
Thank you for your time.
That brings us to number 8 on the agenda, which is Planning Commission member comments. Do we have any Planning Commission member comments? Hearing no comments, we'll move on to number 9, which is adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Got a motion by Duden and a second by Charnel. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. want to develop this property next to the city of Cannon Falls, they should request annexation into the city of Cannon Falls, and we'll deal with it from that point. I don't want another Cedar Hills. Or, for that matter, bringing in other developed areas that are on private wells and septics.
Seems to me there was a few people irritated up on Cedar Hills. Probably come up with a few names.
I have to go back.
With the
I
mess
don't-
that went